Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Today we'll be talking with Christian all about WebDriverIo 8 being released. Really excited about this. I think it's a major release that's we've been waiting for a while. If you don't know, Christian is a full-stack engineer passionate about open source and open standards, a driven individual with the ability to adapt to any situation, and a proven potential to grow himself and others. Christian is a quality-focused engineer with a background in automation technologies and test-driven development, and he's a leader in this space, especially with WebDriverIo that everyone raves about. So really excited to learn more about these new features and the latest version of WebDriverIo and why you need to be checking this out as well. You don't want to miss this episode. Check it out. Hey, Christian, welcome back to the Guild.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me.
It's been a while. I think last I spoke to you was 2019. So is there anything you've been up to since then that you want the Guild to know more about that I may have missed out on your bio?
I mean, no, everything was perfect. Great bio, Reed. I've been running the open source program office at SawSteps for a while, which was a lot of fun, and doing some test automation there. Obviously, working on WebDriverIo, and now my career changed a little bit. I joined some friends working at a company called Stateful, where we are building developer tooling and trying to make developers happy by building productive toolings there.
Nice. So since you are working with developing tooling, does that help inform you of how you're going to, what kind of features you think would be really helpful for WebDriverIo?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been able to that much to like put my ideas into action because there's a lot of stuff that we're currently working on at Stateful itself, but I'm definitely like the whole idea about creating this ephemeral workspace for WebDriverIo that allows anyone to just, create a workspace and start contributing to WebDriverIo. That came from a lot of research that I've done over at Stateful, where we're looking at, the IDE space and how that is developing over the next years.
Nice. I guess before we get into it, if folks missed the episode from 2019, they hear WebDriver, they may automatically think Selenium. So what's WebDriverIo? It's different than Selenium WebDriver.
That is correct. Yeah, people still get this wrong, and that's totally fine. WebDriver as itself is the web standard that helps you to automate browser. Selenium and WebDriverIo are both projects that implement that protocol, both independent, both like great open source project, in my opinion. There are differences, it's not all the same.
What are the main differences, though, that you would say?
I've been talking to the folks at the Selenium project a lot, and I think Titus mentioned it really well. I think Selenium enables you to automate the browser, and WebDriver comes more with like the test framework aspect. If you want to test your application and you don't want to build your framework yourself, you can use WebDriverIo. There are similar tools for Selenium, like Nightwatch is now built on Selenium 4. That comes with a lot of built-in capabilities, where if you don't want to, build a whole framework yourself.
So it includes all the plumbing, basically. It's built on top of Selenium, where the foundation's already in place, though, and you have the scaffolding. Everything's ready for you to start adding your own touches, but you don't need to start from the beginning with the contractor with designs to create the house, basically.
And WebDriver has the same. Like WebDriver itself has, the protocol drivers, the WebDriver NPM package and the WebDriverIo as an NPM package that help you to build your own automation framework or your own automation tool even. I've seen projects like Spectron, who was built to test Electron application, was built on WebDriverIo. It comes the same way with a test runner that has this testing spec for you that, removes all the work of plumbing, has like a more, opinionated way, suggests to you how you should run your test.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people, like you said, they want to start from just out of the box with something that's going to work for them. A lot of people find WebDriverIo very helpful that way as well. Easy install, ready to go. So cool stuff. So, I know you work on this a lot, and I'm always curious, when do you know to go to a new version? Like this is version 8. I think you've been releasing, 7.1, 7.2. Like when does it become like, wow, this is version 8? What does that usually represent?
So in the past, I've always been, the reason why I work on WebDriver, because it just allows me to learn so many things around different kind of aspects, mostly around Node.js, because WebDriver is built on Node.js. And now with version 8, one of the biggest, topics that I've been tackling was the CommonJS to ESM transition, right? Like the Node.js, I think version like 12 or 13, 14 has introduced ESM as like a new module system, which is a standardized way to import JavaScript files into other files and like the whole import, functionality. And now the whole ecosystem basically in Node.js transitions to ESM. That was something that, piqued my interest and something I wasn't really, I didn't know much about. And so I was like, okay, at some point the project has to move to ESM anyway. So I just get ahead of myself, look into what ESM is about and, transform the whole project, which, has caused me to transition to basically touch every file. The same happened, I think, with version 7, where I transformed the whole code base from JavaScript to TypeScript. And all the previous version had like a simple, like the same, story behind where it's like this technical thing that I wanted to learn. And, the project enables me to do that.
Nice. So I'm just looking at the notes, the release notes, and it does mention CommonJS to ESM transition. One thing that popped out is Jest. I know Jest is a pretty popular unit type of framework. Why would you move from Jest to Vitest? Is that part of the EMS transition that in order to take advantage of ESM, you needed to move that library?
Correct. Jest currently has not a good support for ESM. The team is working on that, and at some point it will have support for it. But at the point where I started the transition, Vitest was just much further along with that effort. And since the transition from Jest to Vitest was very easy because basically Vitest took a lot of like the design goals from Jest and put it into their framework, it was like, okay, if I want to continue and be fast with the ESM transition, the Vitest transition as well, like was one of the things that had to be done as well.
So I've actually never heard of Vitest, so this is something I love having this podcast because I'm learning. It's just, what is Vitest then? Does it have more different benefits? I'm not comparing tools, one's better than the other, but does Vitest give you anything else that maybe Jest didn't give you?
I couldn't actually pinpoint like a specific feature that Vitest is better than Jest. It's almost the same interface. It almost does the same thing, like unit testing, including snapshots and all that fun stuff. The only reason why I moved over is that, the ESM support that has been lacking in Jest a little bit. But other than that, both frameworks are same. I've been using both projects a lot in the past.
So this is something basically behind the scenes, right? If someone takes version 8, they don't need to worry about going from CommonJS or importing or changing any libraries in their code, do they?
No. The transition only happened within the WebDriver code base. WebDriver will still support, your CommonJS code base because it is possible to import CommonJS files in an ESM environment or run them there. So there's ways to execute both types in an environment. And so actually V8 is one of the first releases where there's actually not really major breaking changes. People should just be able to upgrade their version and go with it.
Nice. So let's talk about some new features. I believe the first one you have listed is a new browser version of the runner, or a new browser runner. Can you talk a little bit more why you think that's one of the most exciting features that were actually pointed out in the README log as one of the highlighted areas?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that one. I've been working on a lot of web components as I'm, working on VS Code extensions and use web components in there. And I've always found that there's not really any testing framework that would allow me to run these, to test these web components in an actual browser. A lot of these frameworks, testing frameworks, they use JS DOM, which is an implementation of the HTML specification, and it has been supposed to be used for testing. But I'm this extremist who wants to test his components, his React, Vue, whatever you have, components in an actual browser, because that's a space, that's where they actually be used from my users. So there hasn't been really any framework that would allow me to do that. And so I took this as a challenge, and with all these great tools that we have these days with the Byte server, it has been actually not that difficult to build a runner that basically would take your test, would put it into the browser, and would allow me to use an actual browser environment to test front-end code that are running in a browser as well, like Vue, React, Svelte components. Or if I want to run, JavaScript code that are supposed to run in a browser that use, for instance, the Canvas web APIs, I can do that now with WebDriver very easily.
Nice. And I guess it also points to the type of DOM you're using, a JS DOM, rather than an actual browser, something that helps you with component testing. Like, talk a little bit about, I guess it points out some disadvantages compared to running tests in the browser compared to the JS DOM.
Exactly. Since JS DOM basically just runs within Node.js, you don't have like a UI really that is being rendered. There's a good guess how the UI looks like, but you cannot do things, for instance, to interact with pseudo elements. Like if you have an hover in a component, it's not really possible to test that with JS DOM. And again, the Canvas API, there's some workarounds so you get this working with JS DOM as well, but it's not the real Canvas API that you interact with. And so you always end up with with testing it in an environment that you at the end don't deliver, that at the end are not used by your users. And we are at the point where we have the technology to run this in an actual browser, and I feel like, why shouldn't we do so?
Very cool. And another thing it points out is it allows you to use different frameworks like a testing library. And I guess it allows you to use APIs interchangeably. Is that something you think is going to be a big feature?
Yeah, I wanted to have testing library as like a first class support. It is basically, it's a popular framework that helps you to stage your component test, basically to render it into the browser and to find elements in there and assert elements to be in a certain state. And I've been using it quite a lot, and I like the structure and the community behind the testing library. So I wanted have users do the ability to use just that for the little plumbing that is needed to render the component in the DOM. But basically, at the end of the day, the user can do everything that they want, with the browser environment that they have.
Nice. So I haven't used spoke to a lot of people that use Karma lately, but it was a more popular library back in the day, or a runner. This actually replaces the need to use something like Karma. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Karma has been very popular when Angular came around, as people wanted to test the Angular components in the browser. However, Karma has been not really seen a lot of development recently, and WebDriver can be an ideal replacement because it does actually the same thing. It allows you also to run browser tests on Source Labs or Browser Stack or all the other cloud vendors. If you need Safari or browsers that you don't have to your disposal. It comes with almost the same features, has better integration, and WebDriver more maintained as Karma. So yeah, it would be a replacement for that project.
Awesome. Also, it has some new action interface, and what really caught my attention was the ability to chain almost different commands together to do different events in the browser. So back in the day, I used to have to test like a mainframe app that was rendered in a browser. And the only way that logic would be generated is if you tabbed out of fields, which was really difficult. But with the WinRunner, you would be able to do the different like keyboard combinations to get it happening. And this almost looks like it when I'm looking in the send keys documentation here. I guess I'm rambling. So could you just tell us a little bit more about the new action interface, and especially the ability to use a kind of to kind of chain these type of commands together?
Yeah, this is kind of like a little bit overdue feature. WebDriver hasn't been really doing great in supporting the W3C WebDriver Action API that well, because you can send in a JSON like a JSON object, and it would do that. But now with the new Action API, you have some type safety. The code is better readable because you have these commands that you can chain with each other, and it makes just like creating these action calls much easier. And that's important. But basically now with the browser runner now is also important, to help you test Canvas application where, you have to interact with the Action API to do to create user events. And so basically the new action interface comes with, the browser runner to, help you to do those kind of things and simplify just creating and help and, suggest users to use more of this Action API because it's very powerful.
So I know I spoke to Simon Stewart a few times in the past, and he always mentioned WebDriver Bidi support. Um, one, what is it? And two, is this part of the new version 8 of WebDriverIo?
Correct. Yeah, we like the WebDriver web standard for automating browser has been developed during the phase as all the new front-end frameworks came out, like React, Angular, and Vue. And it was always developed with the idea in mind that you can do what the user is doing. Basically, you click on a button, you see an element, and so on. But all these new browser frameworks have created the demand for more introspection on the application. And so we've seen other tools like Cypress and Playwright, becoming very popular because they would allow those kind of things. Now, since 2019, the W3C working group has been working on a new version for WebDriver, which has the name Bidi because it allows you a bidirectional communication and kind of like enables the introspection part for browser automation. So we will see features like listening to log events or to events that happen in the browser, like DOM events, log events, network events. We will be able to see the ability to mock network capabilities because that's a big part of introspecting the browser. And all these features will now be available in the new Bidi stack. And with V8, we will ship the first primitives for WebDriver Bidi to send commands and listen to events. And we will, moving forward, we will kind of like secretly replace the WebDriver commands with Bidi commands without having the user to see it. So we will be running the commands more effectively, basically, on the new protocol. And also, allow the user to give the user an interface to, work with the protocol if they feel like it. But at the end, we will try to build abstraction around it. Like, for instance, now WebDriver already supports mocking network requests, but it uses the DevTools interface for that. So we will, moving forward, once we have network capabilities in the Bidi protocol, we will kind of broaden out the support above DevTools and allow whenever browsers support it, allow it on other browsers as well.
Very cool. I know a lot of people used to use. They went to Cypress because of the ability to kind of interact with the network and sniff it. Bidi seems to replace give that feature to Selenium and WebDriverIo that may have been lacking maybe a few years ago, but now WebDriver and WebDriverIo seems to have that exact ability, I think. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. I mean, that's with many things that happen. Also, in the past, it's like there are tools out there that provide you a certain capability to do things, and the people that work on standards, they think, okay, this is a signal for us to kind of like create a standardization around it to make it really available in all browsers and to make it more accessible to people. And so that's the same way it happened here. We've seen tools like Cypress, Puppeteer, Playwright that provided a lot of great functionalities, and that was a signal to the working group being like, yeah, we have to provide and we have to work on adding introspection capabilities, and that is now what's happening. And we see this, being implemented in browsers across all browsers. And so we have it, available, and we can do now actual browser testing and fill up the gaps that we've seen before.
So you just mentioned a bunch of different tools. There's so many automation tools out there nowadays. How do you know how to select one for you? Maybe not one's better than the other, but maybe might be better for your situation. So how would someone know WebDriverIo for my particular needs would be the perfect fit?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many factors that play into it. And again, there's nothing really a better or worse because it's like comparing apples with oranges, right? So in my opinion, WebDriverIo might not have the best, DevX capabilities because there's not like a team behind, like a company that sponsors a whole team working on this project. However, it comes with the advantage that it is based on web standards, and it allows you to do cross-browser automation in real browsers and not like a browser engine. And it has mobile support. If running on actual browsers and mobile support is important for you, then WebDriver might be a choice. If you, however, if you build an application and you want to have some quick testing cycles and have something like a somewhat good clarification whether or not your application works from end to end, and you're not interested in a lot of cross-browser nor mobile, then, Playwright and other tools might be, working for you as well, and have a maybe better dev experience. But, it's always like the factors of what you're looking for. And, that should decide. And also I always recommend people, take a tool and take it for a test ride. There's a lot of stuff that is, said in blog posts, which is always not really true at the end. I've been reading a lot of stuff and we're like, that is not factual correct at all. So it's always good to take it on a test ride and see how the tool behaves, and if it feels good to use it, and then, make a clear decision on that.
Yeah, I highly recommend you try it for yourself. You make your own decision. I shouldn't say this. I had someone contact me from a different tooling saying, hey, this other person is talking about another tool and they're going to compare them and it's not correct. But I guess it's up to you to do the proof of concept and test it out. Like you said, don't believe the hype. Try it yourself and see if it actually does what you need it to do.
Correct.
So, I think it's interesting you mentioned like you don't have a company backing this project, but so it's usually not mentioned in the top tier of tools, but the people I talk to that use WebDriverIo tend to be kind of fanatic about it. So I guess that's kudos to you for doing that. So why do you think people, when they do use it, tend to really evangelize it, I guess?
I don't know. Maybe it's me that is like this extremist on when it comes to these tools. Like, if I would have someone who gives me millions of dollars to work on WebDriverIo, that's great. But at the end, I would make myself dependent on it. And I'd rather work on a project that is, driven by interested people that are, has no, commercial aspect, or as less commercial aspect as possible, which is why I moved WebDriverIo to the OpenJS Foundation in the first place. Because there I get like a neutral foundation to build a project with sustainability in mind. So we don't see things like what happened to Protector, where, it has been developed by a corporate identity, and at some point there was no commercial interest running this team anymore. Then, it disappears, and then the project, will not continue to be maintained anymore. If that is like a unique example, maybe, but, there's a lot of others there's similar things happened in the past. And that's what I feel like working on WebDriverIo is such a great fun, because there's just a neutral ground. Everyone can join in. There's like not me who, steers the roadmap of the project. It's like once someone has put in the effort and energy to contribute to the project goals, then, there's a democratic decision where things should head. And I think that's a fine ground for working on technologies these days.
Absolutely. And I also like how you said this follows standards. So if standards should be important to companies and to people using tools. So if you look at a tool, that should be one of the factors. Does it follow industry standards? I think that's a big indicator of where you think the tooling is going to go or how it's going to help you. Yeah. Cool. So I know you have some other things in here like miscellaneous and optional globals. So anything sexy about either of those you think that people should know about?
Not very particularly. I mean, the global thing is important because you see this in other test framework as well, where, it used to be cool to just attach things on the global scope and then use it from there. You don't need to set up things. You don't need to have this import. But at the end, having this implicit import is important or very good when you use things like TypeScript, where these types can be mixed with other test frameworks. Like the expect function to do assertion can, if you have a Jest project, if you have Jest in your project as well, it can, interfere with that. And so having these imports is, I think, a nice way, especially now with the browser runner, when WebDriver becomes more like a unit test framework for a lot of people, unit testing their web components, and maybe have a different unit test framework for other stuff. I think that's important. And yeah, at the end of the day, it was there's not like a big end-to-end automation feature. I've been asking the community, hey, what do you like to see, like API testing or a better IDE experience? And their API testing was up a lot. And all these features are great, and we will look into them. But with the ESM transition was basically the biggest chunk that now will allow us to do a lot of cool things like running WebDriver in the browser, which is possible with the new browser runner. And we can now look into, building an IDE experience, which some of the community already start doing. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up in that area as well.
Nice. So it sounds like, I know with Selenium, they put in a lot of years building the latest release. And it got to the point now where, because they did that, they opened up a whole new avenue of different things they could do now, because they put in all that hard work behind the scenes. It sounds like this is something similar that you did with WebDriverIo. So what's on the roadmap then that you think? I know you said you could, now that you have these things in place, you could start doing other things that you've probably been wanting to do. Is there anything on your roadmap, or will you see that down the road is definitely going to be something that could probably be a feature in a newer version of WebDriverIo?
I'm currently putting a better roadmap together for the community so that everyone knows where they could contribute to. I think there's a lot of exciting areas. For me personally, after the V8 release, I would like to put my time and effort into building an IDE experience. I started already doing that. And then folks over at SAP have built an IDE extension as well. And I found that very interesting. So we'll join forces to do some cool stuff there. And then we'll see, there might be a new technical challenge or a technical thing that I would like to explore, and then it will land in WebDriverIo, because, I'm just one of many contributors that tries to, work in open source.
Absolutely. And actually, I'll have a link to the roadmap as well. Some listed here for upcoming projects, better debugging capabilities, which I think would be awesome. Parallelized test on test block level versus file level. Whole bunch of cool things that people should definitely check out. So, you mentioned interesting thing. How can people contribute? Is it all you, Christian? I mean, when people are looking for a tool, they're looking for a community, they're looking for one that's maintained not just by one person, but there's a group of folks doing it. So how's the health of WebDriverIo for maintainers? And are you looking for help? And if people want to help, what can they do?
Yeah, so I have to do a little bit better job in posting out a roadmap for people to see, which are the parts that they can contribute to. Ultimately, they can look into, the issue list, or look into the roadmap and get in contact with us maintainers. And, we can, work with you all to, find a place where you like to explore technologies. The project has a one-on-one happy hour. So there's twice or 4 times a week, people can have a one-on-one session with one of the maintainers working on a particular ticket or issue. And I've been doing this a lot in the past, and it has been great fun to just meet all the contributors to WebDriverIo and, work with them on concrete things that they're interested about.
Awesome. Okay, Christian, before we go, is there one piece of actual advice you can give to someone to help them with their automation testing efforts? And what's the best way to find or contact you or learn more about WebDriverIo?
The best advice is not use just the tool that you see in the blog post, but, take every tool for a spin and see what's good for you. You can find the WebDriver release and all about that probably in the description below, or on WebDriver.io in the blog post that we published. And yeah, you can reach us contributors on the Gitter support channel or on Twitter, wherever you like.
Thanks again for your automation awesomeness. The links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/A426. And while you're there, make sure to click on the Try for Free Today link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Sauce Labs' awesome products and services. And if the show has helped you in any way, why not rate it and review it in iTunes? Reviews really help in the rankings of the show, and I read each and every one of them. So that's it for this episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating end-to-end, full-stack automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com